everyone, my name is Erica Labizan Lopez and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in League City, Texas. And today I wanted to make a video for you guys. I know that there's just so much happening. We're in very uncertain times. Anxiety is high, fear is really high, just stress, making adjustments. We're all being flexible and we're all trying to find various ways of kind of regulating ourselves and helping our kids regulate and working within our relationships, which is what I wanted to talk about today. So I have a lot of other video ideas and blog post ideas, but if you do want to leave an idea or a question for me in the comments, I'd be happy to adjust to that and to make a video on whichever topics you guys bring up. So please be sure to do that and let me know your thoughts on this video. But today I really wanted to explore what's happening in our relationships during this coronavirus pandemic. You know, it's already hard managing life, and then we get hit with this crisis that's completely out of our control. I'm not sure that many people expected this to happen, and it's really, it hits hard, right? Like, people have all kinds of different coping skills, different coping styles, and, you know, I have seen in the past, especially after going through Hurricane Harvey here in Houston a couple years ago, that crises can really take a toll on our relationships. And I'm sure that you've all already noticed this happening. You know, conflict increases, we get snippy with each other, and those are all things that people want to know how to deal with. So I thought I would bring to you some of my thoughts about, first, why this is happening in your relationships, and also a couple of quick tips that you can use to help manage things over the next few weeks, couple months. We're not really sure about that right now, right? And so today I'm going to give you a few tips. I have a lot more things that I've been thinking about, some things I can offer and that I've been going over, but we're going to start with just a couple things today because I don't want to overwhelm you and give you too much information that also becomes difficult to process, right? We're trying to get some quick things, some helpful tips that you can implement starting today, and that's my goal for this video. So first of all, I kind of want to talk about why this is happening, why these tensions may be very high. So I really like to think about it like almost any other big event that you've been through in life. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but big events, moving, having a baby, major life transition, changing careers, all of these things are things that we normally think about in relationships as things that add to stress and that we see results from that, right? Like, we see an increase in tension. We know the first year after having a baby that relationship satisfaction goes down and conflict increases significantly. For the vast majority of couples, 92% of couples, conflict is going to increase after you have a baby. So let's look at this, like kind of the issue that we're dealing with now, which is widespread and complex, right? But we're dealing with a crisis situation. You know, there's really no other way to think about it. Like, this is a crisis emergency type of situation. That doesn't mean we need to panic. That doesn't mean that we have to respond in such a way that causes more panic. But we do need to understand that this is a crisis that we're in, and that some of our reactions are going to be normal. In fact, most of them are going to be normal. So when you find yourself snippy, or when you find yourself arguing about the 8th snack that your 5-year-old is grabbing for themselves out of the pantry that neither of you gave permission for, when you find yourselves in tears, when you find yourself saying something mean, when you find yourself getting short, when you find yourself overwhelmed with the anxiety that we're dealing with, when it feels like you can't even formulate a sentence, you can't even get your thought out. These are normal reactions. These are expected reactions. So from how I'm thinking about it as a therapist, as the outsider, kind of looking in as somebody with this knowledge and experience and training in crisis management, if these reactions weren't occurring in your household and in your personal life, I would be concerned, to be honest. That would be not an expected reaction, right? All of these things are expected reactions, which means that we know how to deal with those things. We know that there are skills, probably many that you already possess that you just haven't been able to quite implement yet. But you will be once we are able to regulate and calm down a little and think more clearly, right? So that's not a criticism by any means. That's me saying that, in fact, all of these things are perfectly normal. And if you weren't experiencing some of these things, that would lead me to think that there's still some denial, perhaps shock going on, or something else going on that is getting in the way of you being able to experience everything that's happening, your own feelings included, and being able to sit with the feelings that are going on. So, I think for most of us, we start to question ourselves, right, when we are getting upset, or when we are overreacting, or we are lashing out, we're being impatient, we're having trouble sitting in our homes, right? We are needing that social connection. When we find ourselves struggling, we tend to criticize that. But in actuality, these are things that I would expect any of you and all of you to be experiencing. That is normal, and it is okay. And if you can see my sign in the background here, it's okay to not be okay. Part of that is going to be recognizing I'm not okay, and here's what's going on. Those symptoms will help you get to the place that you can say what's happening and be able to deal with it. And I hope that you can do that with your partner, because that's going to get you the best results, the best outcomes, if you feel like you have that support and that the two of you can lean on each other. So I can talk more about that in a video in the future, or a blog post if you guys are interested in it. But let's go ahead and move on to the next idea here, which is really looking at why some of these things are happening, right? And the feelings that are getting brought up or triggered as different events are unfolding, or different circumstances in your life are falling into place during this pandemic. So there was actually an interesting research done around 9/11. So many of us were alive during 9/11, remember it. It was definitely one of those times in history, like many other times, that you know where you were, right? And in the aftermath of 9/11, the National Institute for Mental Health put a lot of money into mental health resources for the people who have gone through 9/11. It was expected that this would be one of the biggest traumas in history, that this would be something that we were going to need to do a lot of trauma work around. And so many resources went into this. And actually what they expected to find is that many people would develop post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of 9/11. What they found in actuality is that the vast majority of people did not develop any mental health disorder from 9/11, that most people were able to overcome this using resiliency, coping skills, relying on their strengths and resources, developing support systems, and maintaining meaningful connections with other people in their lives. So the vast majority of people involved in 9/11 directly did not actually end up developing PTSD as a result of it, or other traumatic responses. In the short term, yes, like I said, those symptoms, those reactions were expected. They are normal. They've experienced a trauma. They've experienced a crisis, right? And so those symptoms that most people experience were expected, and they did dissipate over time. They did go away. What this research found is that actually the people who did develop mental health disorders were people who were not functioning well before that. They did not have resiliency. They did not have adequate coping skills to deal with issues in their life. And that the sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit. So what we know is that the functioning that you have the day before, the place that you're in the day before a crisis occurred, is the best predictor of how you will deal with that crisis. That is going to be the indicator for how you're going to move through and navigate the rest of the situation. So the people who are already experiencing symptoms of, let's say, depression or post-traumatic stress disorder were the ones that in the aftermath of 9/11 ended up having clinical depression or a clinical diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people were able to go into normal functioning with time, and honestly, in a short amount of time. And they actually didn't see residual effects of trauma later, again, for the vast majority of people, not for everyone, and especially for the people who chose to talk about what happened, to get help with what happened, to develop better coping skills. So I have found that to be true for couples as well. And I saw that again, like I said, in the aftermath of Harvey, that it was the couples who had already underlying issues in their relationships. And I think it's the same for most of these other big transitions in life that we go through. If there's already a communication breakdown, if there's already misunderstanding, if there's already a place where we don't see each other, where we don't understand each other, where we can't lean on each other, where I can't be vulnerable with you, where I'm not feeling safe sharing things with you, that's only going to be exacerbated by the crisis that we're currently undergoing. So I want to make that very clear, that the current crisis and any other big crisis or transition in your life, having a baby, moving, changing careers, having an illness, right? Or getting a condition that's going to affect your life. None of those things are causing the marriage problems. The marriage problems or the relationship problems were already there and pre-existing and have now been brought to the surface or exacerbated by an external thing such as this pandemic, right? And so we want to make sure that we understand that. Let's not blame these external circumstances for the issues that we're facing and continue to not face them, to continue to not deal with them. Let's actually start dealing with the issues that we have, because it's not, they existed before, right? This is not new to the relationship. It's just coming up more easily and readily, and it's popping up all over the place, like when our partner asks us to make some breakfast or to get something and we're snapping at them, right? That's not really about the breakfast. I always say, it's not about the socks on the floor. It is never about the socks that got left on the floor. It's about all this other stuff that comes with that. And so now's the time. Let's deal with it now in the midst of the crisis, when we can actually develop better coping skills, right? And that's going to be hard to do. Our resources right now for all of us individually, within our relationships, as parents, as coworkers, our resources are going towards survival. That's, again, normal, right? Like, our brains are wired to do that. Biologically, evolutionary, we are wired to go into survival mode right now. And what that means is we don't have the ability, for most of us, to sit down and think, ooh, I could have used my I statements better when I brought that up. I could have approached that in a much gentler way. Yeah, that'd be great. That's nice. I would love if we could do that. We don't have the capability to do that right now. It's just not going to happen. It's not an excuse to, talk rudely to people, but we don't have it in us. That is not where our resources are going in our brains, right? And so with that, we'll need to extend some grace to each other, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I do want to go over some coping styles. So in remembering that we have different coping styles from our partners, everybody has different coping styles, and that's going to play into this as our resources in our brains and our bodies are moving into getting used to this new normal, which, to be honest, is changing every day, sometimes by the hours in the days. And so our bodies are really making a lot of adjustments, and some people tend to hyper focus on those things. That's their coping style. That's okay. Some people kind of just move into problem solving mode and, soldiering on. What do we need to do next? Let's figure this out. And they're very calm. That's okay. Some people feel very panicked and are worried about the risks that are going to be involved in this. That's okay. Some people are risk aversive and tend to look at what can we control versus what can we not control. That's okay. Some people kind of shut down. They don't want to talk about some of these things. They don't want to acknowledge what's happening. That's okay. That's all okay right now. And, the thing is to remember, especially as you're trying to work with your partner and how we're going to talk about this, how we're going to deal with it, what are we going to do? Neither of you is wrong. You're both right. Let's take that in for a moment. You're both right. And it's all okay. There's no right or wrong way to deal with what we're dealing with. There's no good or bad. We just have to figure out what is, and then we can start working together in that way. So if you know your partner well, which you probably do, you probably have some expectation about how they might be dealing with this, right? But I want you to kind of erase that, because we need to sort of take it day by day. It's good to know your partner, and it's good to have some ideas about how you may be able to support them and what they're going through, and you may have some ideas about what you need, and I hope that we can have a good conversation around that. But we also need to really practice our muscles for grace and compassion. That's going to be huge during this process. We need to have grace for ourselves, for our partners, for our children, but just especially in our relationships. We have a few things that can happen, right? If we're not able to extend that grace, and we're not able to give our partner a pass because they snapped at us about the socks on the floor, we need to take a step back in that moment and say, they're doing the best they can. They're doing the best they can. I'm doing the best I can. Let's all take a breath. Let's just take a breath and start over. You can start over at any time of the day, right? And so that's going to be one of the things for you to remember. Grace. And I always say, give as much grace as you would like to receive. You may not be receiving it that way right now, but extend as much grace as you would ideally like to receive in return. And I think that will make it easier for you and for your partner, right? But do that. Take a breath together. And remind yourselves, okay, let's start over. Let's start over in this conversation. You can start over 1,000,000 times a day, 5,000,000 times a day, 10,000,000 times a day. You can start over whenever you want, okay? So, again, grace, compassion, take a breath, start over. And agree to that together. We're going to start over. And you know what? We're going to be starting over a lot, right? Like, it's not going to be once a day. It's going to be many times a day that we're starting over. But that's okay. We can choose to start over at any time, as opposed to getting caught in a cycle where we're screaming at each other. That's not helpful. That's not helpful now. It's not helpful most times, right? We can choose to start over, and we can choose how we want to express what's going on. And we can take our time to figure that out. I think another thing that could be really helpful right now is reflecting on some previous crises that you've been through, right? So I've mentioned that a couple times already in the video. Some of the main things that you've been through. Have you moved recently? I moved last year. It was real hard. I'll tell you that right now. It was real hard. But we were able to figure out some things in that move. And like I said, there were some things that came to the surface, even for me and my husband. So let's go ahead and reflect on that. What are other times? And you can take 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I wouldn't probably spend longer than 20 minutes at this time, and I can talk about that again in another video if you want. But take a few minutes, set a timer, make some time for you and your partner to sit down. What are other hard things that we've been through? Like, we've been through some crappy situations, right? We've been through some transitions in life, and this is what came up for us. And how can we get ahead of that? How can we start thinking about this differently so that we don't have to repeat that? What did we learn? What did we learn from that experience, and what worked really, really well for us then that we can carry into now? So that could be an immensely powerful conversation, and carving out the time for you and your partner to reflect on your relationship and the things you've done well, the things that you've overcome, the things that you've learned. That can be incredibly powerful. So I really encourage you to do that today. Do that today. And again, we're starting over, right? We're going to do something different, and we're going to start that today by having this conversation. The last thing for today's video is really around focusing on our language, the language that we're using with our partner. And I think you can do this with your kids too, but this video is focused on our relationships, right? So shifting, I think, into team. Call your partner your teammate. We need to do this. We can work on this. Let's figure this out together. Hey, teammate. And I mean literally, you can wake up in the morning, hey, teammate, what's going on? Where are you today? What's happening for you? How are you feeling? And then you'll know, right? You'll know from the beginning of the day some direction, some way that you can start moving. But I think that switch in language from feeling like we're alone in this, that we've been fighting for 3 days, and what the hell am I gonna do next, right? Like, what's gonna be the next thing that's gonna set one of us off? We don't have to do that, we don't have to do that. We can start over, we can have some grace, and we can change the way that we're thinking and talking about this thing, right? So, hey, partner, let's start over. I'm on your team. You're on my team. Let's figure this out together. What do we need to do differently to make this work? And what are the issues that are coming up for us that we want to kind of set aside for a moment, deal with this thing that we're dealing with over here, and we can make space to come back to that problem. Because like I said, this crisis is not creating that problem. It's already there, and we're just going to start figuring out how to deal with that, right? But that's not what we're doing at this moment. In this moment, we're figuring out how to move from this step to the next right step, the next right thing. So I know I've given you a lot to think about today. Again, that breath, right? So much happening, so much going on, so much to think about. I hope that this video was helpful. Please let me know your thoughts on this video, on ideas for future videos, any questions that you want me to answer. I'm happy to come back. I can do a live. Please let me know. I want to know what would be helpful. I'm definitely here for you. If you want to read some blogs that I've written or upcoming blogs, definitely check out my website, erikalltherapy.com. That's ERIKALL therapy.com. I've got some resources going up on there. More will be coming in the next coming days. And I'm planning to be writing a lot more. I'm putting a lot more up. So definitely, like I said, let me know what you want. Check that out. Check out my work. And if you do want to contact me, you can find me on there. Thanks, everybody, and we'll get through this together. It's okay to not be okay. See you next time.